One holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher! And let's talk about prop pallies. No, I mean Brewmaster monks. Prop pallies. We're going to be drawing some very close comparisons. You guys want to know what the feel of the Brewmaster tank monk is. I'm going to try and do some comparisons to you. It's not exactly going to be the same. It's the first tank we've had with energy, which is definitely a little bit unusual. It took me a little while to get a grip of what the hell was going on. You guys are going to experience the same thing. But I'm going to try and bring down to you exactly how this thing plays out, the differences, and just the way it feels. It feels, let's get it out of the way, it feels a lot like a prop paladin. It does feel a lot like a prop paladin to me. There's various single target abilities, there's various AoE abilities that you're picking and choosing from, which you can say of other tasks, but the way the actual spells feel and the way they use resources feels very much like a prop paladin. I actually think that's a good thing. Prop paladins are one of, if not the most popular tanks we've had over the last couple of years, at least since TBC, I'd say, when they became overwhelmingly popular due to how powerful their AoE tanking was. All the way through TBC, through Wrath, we saw a huge rise in the number of prop paladins. And even just looking at my channel, the prop paladin stuff is the way ahead of every other tank class, which makes me sad as the warriors are always pretty cool. But they do have a combination of other stuff all mixed together. So let's break it down. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this vid. I want to make sure you guys get a good grasp of what the hell is going on. Okay, so we're going to pick Brewmaster. We are the master of the brew, of the beer, and we're going to get all sorts of crazy stuff. So we get Blackout Kick. Costs us 2 chi. Thank you guys for correcting in the video. Kai, of course, is Greek, not Chinese. Chi is the Chinese way of the energy and the life force. All good stuff. You guys made some good comments on that one. So we get the Blackout Kick, which we saw with the DPS as well. Kick with a blast of chi energy, dealing 9,000 to 10,000 physical damage. So you can see there's not a huge damage range on that. It's a pretty standard amount of damage. Also causes you to gain shuffle. Every day I'm shuffling. No, I won't do that. Increasing your parry chance by 20% and your stagger amount by an additional 20%. We're going to get to stagger. Don't worry about it. It's a new word in the world of tanking. We're going to get to stagger. But parry, of course, we know what parry is. We know all about parry. We get Dizzying Haze, 20 energy. You hurl a keg of your finest brew. Why would you throw away the best brew? This makes no sense to me. Reducing the movement speed of all enemies within 8 yards by 50% for 15 seconds. Deals a high amount of threat. Effective targets have a 3% chance to have their melee attacks misfire and strike themselves instead of 11,000. And strike themselves instead for some damage. Very unusual ability. So strange. Let's look at it on the face value. Let me throw one for you. There you go. This is what you're going to get. Kind of like a Death and Decay. But you can spam this bad boy. Look at it. It costs hardly any energy. Woo! There's brew flying absolutely everywhere. It does no damage initially. It's weird. It does a high amount of threat. But it does no damage initially. We'd like, when we're doing threat, to see some damage numbers pop up to make sure it's working. Dizzying Haze, it doesn't actually do any straight up damage. But its effective attacks have a 3% chance, now that's remarkably low, right? That is really low, of actually hitting themselves in the face. I like the idea that they get drunk and punch themselves in the face for 12,000 damage, but it's only a 3% chance. So in general, you're not going to see any damage from this, but it does do a high amount of threat. Very unusual ability. You're going to have to trust this one, that it is doing a lot of threat. I've tried it out in a few different scenarios. And yes, it does do a tremendous amount of threat. So it's very, very cool ability. If a little slack, the fact that it costs so little energy and we can actually just spam it away doing high amounts of threat. One thing worry, I don't like that aspect of it. Maybe if Dizzying Haze had a higher chance just to do a smaller amount of damage, I would be more cool with that. So we can actually see some numbers flying up to make sure our Dizzying Haze is doing the business. Breath of Fire. Now this is an AoE ability. It requires 2 chi. Breathing Fire causes 5,000 damage to all targets in front of you within 8 yards. If Dizzying Haze is on the target, they will burn for an additional 8,286 damage. Okay, so we have this little combo generating. Now remember, Dizzying Haze itself does not generate any chi. It costs us 20 energy, does not generate chi. So you can see if I'm spamming on here, all these targets are being affected by my Dizzying Haze. You can see that right there. They're all slow, but you can see I did not generate any chi. So instantly we can say to ourselves, there must be another way of generating chi in order to get our Breath of Fire off, and we'll get to that soon. Well, our first damage reduction cooldown is Guard, costs us 2 chi. You guard against future attacks, absorbing 32,000 damage for 30 seconds. Any heals you apply to yourself while guarding are increased by 30%. So it's sort of like a vampiric embrace mixed with absorb. We get a buffed heal to ourselves, which is, you know, you could maybe mix that with a Word of Glory kind of combo. It's a very weird, unusual, blended together feeling. But essentially, it's a shield absorb. Very similar to a shield barrier of a warrior, but also gives us a buff to our own healing. Any heals you apply to yourself. It's not heals from other people, okay? So bear that in mind. We're not going to jump at the talents right now. We're going to go straight into the spellbook like an absolute gangster. Okay, so avert harm. We have seen this before. 3-minute cooldown. You cause 30% of all damaged party and raid members within 10 yards to be redirected to you. Lasts for 6 seconds. The damage received through avert harm can be staggered. Avert harm is cancelled if you reach 10% or lower health. This is your big badass raid cooldown. Okay, this is the big beastie raid cooldown. 30% damage cooldown for absolutely everybody. Now, this damage is absorbed on you. So what we're going to see used on this, and we've seen it in some raids that I've done, is, dudes, I'm avert harming. I need some damage reduction on me. Therefore, we're going to get a much better benefit of avert harm on the whole raid. This spell does work if there is one huge AoE blast, then it will absorb all the 30% of that damage, and through the fact that it can be staggered and avert harm is cancelled if you reach 10% of your low health, it will absorb it all and you won't die. Now, we have seen, we've got a couple of tank monks, including Just Wait and MCA, who've been tanking for us in Method, and we have seen that sometimes avert harm, with due to the way the server lag works and all that kind of stuff, they have died while under the effects of avert harm. Sometimes the way damage is registered and the way it's received back into the game can sometimes call that to die. But avert harm is so powerful. Very, very powerful cooldown. Nice to see. We spoke about those two. Let's talk about Clash quickly. It's a Brewmaster only ability. You and the target charge each other, meeting halfway and then stunning all targets within 6 yards. It's like a charging shockwave. It's very strange, mixed with death grip. Okay, so the idea is you and the target charge each other. So you force, like a bull rush, like you're fighting a bull in a field. You kind of command the other target to charge you as well. And then you smash heads in the middle. And that sends out like a shockwave, which stuns everything. So you do actually force the other target to move. So it closes the gap between you and the mob in half. And then you stun them on the other way. It's an interesting ability. It doesn't make logical sense, but hell, in a world where druids are firing off absorb shields, do we need logical sense? Probably not. There's dragons breathing fire all over our asses, so we can stand to lose a little bit of logic. It's an unusual amalgamation of so many different... I'm going to think of how many words I can say today that are about mixing things together. We've already had blended. Now we've got some amalgamations going on. I'll see how my vocab lasts up to that one. So we charge each other, meeting halfway, then stunning all targets. So one thing you do have to know, let's say the training dummy is my target. If it's rooted, nothing happens. You can see your target is tapped. Target is tapped seems to be the wrong word, I would say. We can't charge it. It doesn't work with any rooted mobs, and that's kind of the message you get. But it does work. It's a very interesting ability because you need to pick a mob. If you want to get the stun value, you need to pick a mob maybe that's furthest back, judge the distance, and then get them to meet in the middle to then cause the stun effect. It's an unusual ability. Maybe a little bit of tweaking there to make it slightly more useful. If you bear it up against something like Shockwave, which just boom, stuns everything, it's not as useful, but it's okay. Crackling Jade Lightning sucks balls. We'll skip that. Dizzying Haze we talked about. Elusive Brew. Okay, this is our brew. Elusive Brew increases your dodge chance and melee ranged attacks by 30%. So it increases your chance to dodge melee and ranged attacks by 30% for 1 second per stack of Elusive Brew. Consuming your Elusive Brew charges it. So we're actually going to generate charges. You're going to get this little icon up here that's following and stacking this up. Then we can fire off the Elusive Brew. It's on a 9-second cooldown, okay? This is very much like Shield Block, Holy Shield, that kind of thing. It's something that we can just fire off, forget about, job done, and we can use it on very much cooldown. If you want to spam it, you're not going to get the huge benefit of it. Although it's on a 9-second cooldown, we need those stacks to build up. Very cool. Expel Harm, 40 energy, another 15-second defensive cooldown. It instantly heals yourself for 9,000 to 10,000 damage and causes 50% of the amount healed to instantly be dealt to your nearby target as damage within 10 yards. So this is your heal. Word of Glory. It's called Expel Harm. If you're a prop paladin, you want to try out a Brewmaster, stick it on your Word of Glory button, okay? It's exactly the same thing, costs 40 energy, and it does a little bit of damage and generates some chi. Nothing wrong with that. It's a self-heal, don't need to worry about anything else. Fortifying Brew is your, essentially, shield wall. Turns your skin to stone, increasing your health by 20%, your stagger amount by an additional 20%, and reducing damage taken by 20%. It's got all these things built into it. Very cool little ability. Really like that. Grapple Weapon is a disarm. Nothing to talk about there. Okay, another defensive cooldown. You're starting to see a pattern here. Brewmasters have a lot to manage. We talked about guard in the initial one, but you can see with guard, we've mixed in, we've already got so many. Fortifying Brew, Elusive Brew, Dizzying Haze, Avert Harm, so many defensive cooldowns. Really in a sort of a DK style of how many healing cooldowns we're going to get. Keg Smash. Now, why they just didn't call this Hammer of the Keg Smash Righteousness, I don't know. It's essentially the same thing, but it's also the ability that hits the hardest, okay? It costs a lot of energy. Now, I've not seen the math on Keg Smash versus Blackout Kick, but Keg Smash has other abilities built into it, and it has a larger cooldown. Let's read it. You swing a keg of brew, dealing 12,450 damage to up to 3 nearby targets. Very similar to how Hammer the Righteous used to work, and Thunderclap. Also drenches the target in brew and applies the weakened blows effect. Generates 2 chi. Dizzying Haze, you're going to get the full benefit of Dizzying Haze that we spoke about earlier, and you're going to get weakened blows, demoralizing the target, reducing their physical damage dealt by 10% for 30 seconds. This is going to be essentially your Shield Slam, your Shield of the Righteous, your big smashing ability, your Mangle. This is the one you're going to be watching for the cooldown, okay? Let's move over to here. Let's do a little roll. Hello. Hello to you, roll. Now, it only hits 3 targets, but it's still worth it for single target because you're going to get the weakened blows effect and the Dizzying Haze, and you're going to get some chi out of it, okay? It's a very nice ability. You're going to be watching this one. This is like your big heavy hitter every 8 seconds, okay? You want to keep that on cooldown. It costs 40 energy. It hits harder on a single target than Jab, especially, that we talk about there. Jab is your, if you're not sure what Jab is, I'll just mouse over it there. You jab the target, dealing 2,000 damage, yeah, and generating 1 chi. So that's your bread and butter chi generator, similar to sort of Devastate for a warrior, something along those lines. A little bit of Jab, costs 40 energy, the same amount of energy as Keg Smash. But Keg Smash, of course, gives you all these extra benefits. Really cool little ability. Keep your eye on that one. Legacy of the Emperor is your raid buff. It's the strength add unit. It's like 5%. You only get the 1 raid buff as the Brewmaster. That's okay. Paralysis we talked about. Path of Blossoms we spoke about in the other video. If you want to see that other video, go ahead and click it down below. I'll link it for you there. That's where we did an overview of all the monk stuff. Interrupt is your Spear Hand Strike. Resuscitate is your res. Purifying Brew. Instant Purifies, that's your Dispel. It costs a chi. Roll is your movement. That's cool. Now, we don't get the Flying Serpent Kick, but we do get Spinning Crane Kick, okay? Spinning Crane Kick is pretty cool when we get into some huge AoE situations, but you're going to want to throw down your kegs of Purifying Brew, definitely. You really do want to do that. Spinning Crane Kicks costs 40 energy, it's channeled, and if you've got tons and tons of mobs, loads of ads, it actually starts working out really well. It's not a bad ability by any means. It doesn't do a great deal of damage, but it's okay. During Spinning Crane Kick, though, this is the important bit, you can continue to dodge and parry. Very cool that they added that in there. I was a little bit worried when I see abilities like this, like Bladestorm used to be, is that we lose all avoidance while avoidance while doing something along those lines. So that's okay. We get a new stance, and this is where we're going to talk about stagger a little bit. Okay, so we get Stance of the Sturdy Ox. It reduces damage taken by a flat 25%. It increases your energy regen by 30% and reduces the chance to be critically hit by 6%, so we can no longer be crit by bosses and stuff. Awesome. Increases your stamina by 20% and allows you to stagger damage. Okay, so here is stagger. We've seen lots of abilities that buff stagger in various different ways. You shrug off physical attacks. Remember, physical attacks, not spell damage, causing 70% of the damage to happen instantly and the remaining 30% to be divided over 10 seconds. Okay, so what is this? This is block, essentially. This is block. We still block some of the damage. In fact, we straight up block 30% essentially and take 70% of that damage and we reduce it by 30%. And then we have like a constant bleed debuff is one way of thinking about it, okay? 30% of the damage you take physically, not spells, okay? You get hit in the face with a pyroblast, it's not going to get staggered. But the physical damage will be. It's going to be divided up into 30% damage, and then you've got this sort of constant draining bleed on you. It's not a bad idea to stagger damage. The stagger word is very apt for what this thing does. I quite like it. It's pretty cool. So that's how the damage works. If you're thinking about your blocks and your savage defenses and your blood shields, all that kind of stuff, this is how it works for the monks. They get stagger. They have this constant sort of debuff, bleed, damage over time effect on them, which is basically 30% of the physical damage they take being staggered around and split up. So it's not bad. A little bit easier on the healing and much more in the style of what we're looking for with tanks, which is consistent healing and damage intake. Nice and smooth and staggered. I like that word. We get a statue. I'll throw it down for you there. What up, statue? It is the Summon the Black Ox statue. Okay, summons a Black Ox statue at the target location. It lasts for 15 minutes. Only one Black Ox statue can be summoned at any one time. The Black Ox statue interacts with your Provoke and Leer of the Ox abilities. It's got a passive ability. Every time the monk deals 156,672 damage, what is that number about? The Black Ox statue will cast guard on an injured party or raid member within 40 yards, absorbing 33,000 damage, lasting 30 seconds. This effect cannot be cast on the monk. Unusual or what? Unusual or what? That is a weird ability. Weird little thing to throw down. So now your damage is kind of important, isn't it? Your tank DPS. This is one of the things Blizzard's trying to do for Miss Pandaria, is make tanks consider things like offensive stats. They want people to consider expertise and hit. Tanks all the way through, since forever, except the end of TBC, didn't give a rat's ass about hit and expertise, because we had Vengeance, we had Threat coming out of our ass. If Threat's a non-issue, we don't need offensive stats. Threat is still a non-issue. But they don't want that to be an issue. They don't want people to struggle for Threat anymore. They don't like that. They think people have to work too hard for Threat. Okay, we can live with that. So what they've said is, but we still want you to care about your offensive stats. What they've done is give us this idea, is the more damage we do. And remember, 156,000 damage is not a great deal of damage. It really is not. That is, in the grand scheme of things, it's very, very little. And then we're going to start throwing damage absorption shields on the people who need it. So it's a smart absorb. Now, if it was a heal, it might be slightly better. A smart absorb might be at completely the wrong time, and therefore we haven't got the benefit of this for a while until we do another 160k damage. It's interesting, but remember, it doesn't benefit you. Tiger Palm. Tiger Palm was one of the major offensive abilities of the Windwalker. We're going to get to that soon enough. Tiger Palm for the tanks. Look at this. It costs nothing. Tiger Palm has no resource usage whatsoever. It's a buff that we put on ourselves. We discussed it in the previous video a little bit. Let's read it. Attack the palm of your hand. Wah! Dealing 4,000 to 4,500 damage. Also grants you Tiger Power, causing your attacks to ignore 10% of your enemy's armor for 20 seconds, and it stacks up to 3 times. Let's demonstrate this bad boy for you. This is a buff you're going to want to keep up all the time. Here it comes. There you can see Tiger Power is up. And it's up to 3 stacks. Now notice it's costing me no energy, and it's not generating me any chi. But what it is doing is giving me a 30% ignore armor. So all my damage is buffed, which then interacts better with the Black Ox statue, and so on and so forth. When are we going to use this? You do become resource starved a little bit as the monk, or I have so far. Maybe I'm not playing it correctly. It's still a new class. I haven't done loads with it. But you can see it. Let's see if I start jabbing away. And I'm throwing out some keg smashes and I'm firing some blackout kicks. You will come to a point where you kind of like, well, I can't there. You see, I can't really jab again. I can do a blackout kick, but I can't really jab again. That's when you're going to refresh your Tiger Palm. Using that time effectively. So you have 0 downtime with the monk. Even though it's not costing you anything, it still does a tiny bit of damage. There's nothing wrong with it at all, okay? And this buff will then need to be up all the time. It lasts for 19 seconds, I believe. 20 seconds. Lasts for 20 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. So every 20 seconds, or within that 20-second period, you want to be firing off a Tiger Palm. Even if you're AoEing, doing anything like that. Because it's a buff on yourself, which means if you're doing AoE on a million mobs, you're ignoring 30% of the armor on all of those mobs, making your threat much higher, your damage much higher, making you do a lot more Black Ox statue procs. All this kind of stuff all interacts together. Very cool. Zen Meditation, we have spoke about this before, reduces all damage taken by 90% and redirects you up to 5 harmful spells cast against party and raid members. Another raid defensive cooldown. Monks are living the dream. Are they overpowered? I don't want to say. I don't want to say just now until things are balanced out. But they have a lot of defensive cooldowns and 2 raid cooldowns. I find that interesting. Let's look at the passives we get. Elusive Brew, your auto attack crits grant you up to 3 charges of Elusive Brew. Remember, our Elusive Brew is something we can consume in order to get an extra defensive cooldown. So that comes through your auto attack crits, granting up to 3 charges. Elusive Brew can stack up to 15 times, and then we can consume that at any point we want within 9 seconds. Brewmaster training, you become adept in the ways of the Brewmaster, amplifying 4 of your abilities. So our Spear Hand Strike no longer costs energy. So we have a free interrupt as a tank. Lovely. I don't think there is anything better in this game than a free interrupt. Fortifying Brew also increases your stagger amount by another 20% while active. Cool. Tiger Palm no longer costs chi, as we just discussed. And Blackout Kick, after you Blackout Kick, you gain the shuffle ability. So that's where all those modifications come from. Although those abilities exist in the DPS world, being a Brewmaster, we get all these extra benefits that we've talked about there. Desperate Measures. While at or below 35% health, your Expel Harm has no cooldown. Little bit worried about this being able to spam heal ourselves below 35%. There are some fights that are very similar to a New Barak. There's one particular one where our health of the whole raid needs to be very low, but obviously not on the tanks. Being able to spam Expel Harm, a little bit worried about how powerful that could actually be. Brewmaster tanks can dual wield. There is some speculation that dual wielding is going to be a larger benefit than having a two-handed staff, but not by much. Not by much at all. Fighting style of the passive. The monk's jab ability will change depending on what weapon is equipped, altering the monk's fighting style appearance. A little bit of a passive there, nothing special. Gift of the Ox. You have a chance when you deal melee damage to summon a healing sphere at the side of you that only you can see. When you move through the healing sphere summoned, you get Gift of the Ox and you heal yourself. So you got to keep an eye out for that. A little bit of thing to watch there. I'm always saying in my videos, tanks don't really watch the boss. We watch everything else. And that's okay. That's okay. But now we have a little bit of stuff to watch for. We get some healing spheres, a little bit of extra healing going on for us. Very cool. We're not bothered about that. What's our mastery? Increase our stagger amount. Obviously, very similar to the DKs. Very similar to the DKs. Buffing their blood shields. We then buff our stagger amount. Very similar to everything else. Blocking that, increasing that amount of damage reduction we take on the big hits to increase our smoothness. Very, very cool. Anything else? Nothing too major. This is just all a little past stuff. And of course, we get Vengeance. I need to get Tiger Strikes. That hasn't been added to the trainer. We'll talk about Tiger Strikes now. You have a 10% chance to gain the Tiger Strikes when you auto-attack, increasing your attack speed by 50% and causing your next 4 auto-attacks to cause an extra strike. Wind Fury. I did read about this before. We'll go pick that up. So it's a passive. Nothing to worry about there. That's the Brewmaster lineup. Those are the core abilities. I'm going to jump into some gameplay. This is a particularly long video, so I'm going to do a separate gameplay video for you guys. That's the overview of the Brewmasters. Let's see how they play out.